right, welcome back all the participants to this Grand World University Summit. Once again, I'm Ashish Bharadwaj. I'm the Dean of Jindal School of Banking and Finance at OP Jindal Global University. Good morning and good afternoon to all the speakers, all my panelists who are joining me today for a very high-spirited discussion on a new topic, very important topic. And just so the audience knows, before we started this session, all of us have reached a consensus that this is the most important session of this summit, very important for all higher education institutions. It's about how to stay afloat during these financially tough times and how to sustain efforts in this direction to preserve our own institutions and our visions. It's 12:30 in India, 7 a.m. in Ghana, 3 p.m. in Malaysia. We have 60 minutes in this session. We have hundreds of live YouTube viewers, and we have 4 eminent thought leaders from Asia and Africa joining me today. Let me very quickly introduce you. Professor Shalini Bharat is Vice Chancellor of TIS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences in India. Professor John Gyapong, Vice Chancellor of the University of Health and Applied Sciences in Ghana. Professor Shailendra Mehta is President and Director of MICA in India. And Professor Kamal, Nasharuddin, Mustapha, Vice Chancellor, Universiti, Tenaga, Nasional, Malaysia. Thank you very much for joining me today, all the panelists. If you allow me 2 to 3 minutes, I'll give a very quick context to this very important session before we start. Since March, April last year, all of us have been talking about the significant losses that a lot of institutions around the world, including universities and higher education institutions, have been suffering due to closure of physical campuses. The senior management, vice chancellors, presidents, directors of higher education institutions have been discussing about falling revenues. They've been discussing about closure of income streams, about the steep rise in very unanticipated costs. And all of this is pushing institutions to unleash very cost-effective solutions in the middle of a very, very difficult crisis. This includes painful measures like salary reductions, letting go of faculty and staff, reducing research budgets and student scholarships, and many other things. Now, most universities may not have seen a crisis of this magnitude and severity in their own institutional lifetime. Some of the universities that my panelists represent are relatively young, just like Jindal Global University. So the panelists will be reflecting on how they've been responding to and managing this crisis in the past year and a half, and what are their plans going forward. Now, it seems that the crisis it's not over yet. These challenges continue to test our capacity to protect the interests of our students, our faculty, and our staff. So based on this, I'll be engaging with my panelists on how they've maintained standards of excellence that their institutions are known for while facing these challenges of the pandemic. Now, everyone will agree with me that going forward, universities will have to continue to be prepared to address fiscal uncertainties in months and possibly years to come. This pandemic is really not over yet. Our higher education institutions will have to address cash flow problems due to changes to tuition and other fee structures, creation of new pricing strategies, creation of new funding mechanisms, and maybe creative compensation measures to our employees, and reliance on endowments that are so important in our functioning. So does this mean that we are looking at a complete overhaul of our existing revenue models? We'll find out in the discussion. My last point to provoke thoughts of our viewers and also my panelists is on the financial implications and opportunities in this pivot we made to digital education and online learning, both of which are indispensable, both during the pandemic and post-pandemic. So how creatively are universities designing and strengthening their digital infrastructure to meet the needs of both faculty and supporting the aspirations of learners, knowing that all these interventions have financial implications? Now, during the lockdown, multiple lockdowns across the world, several governments resorted to the good old Keynesian model of economic growth. I'm an economist. I'm trying to draw that analogy. While everything was shut and continues to be like that in several countries, governments are heavily spending on infrastructure, including roads, highways, metros, etc. So do universities have a similar approach or similar plan in mind, or do they have a contrasting approach? Is this a phase that doesn't require investment on physical infrastructure at all? And perhaps it is better to redirect valuable resources to build technological infrastructure and digital learning resources, which is going to be beneficial now and even in the long term. But resources are limited. Institutions face trade-offs. All the institutional leaders in this session make difficult decisions under constraints and uncertainties. So we'll find out how they have approached this matter in the last few months. So the discussion is important for survival of institutions during this pandemic. Let's find out the ways by which institutions have responded so far, their plans to preserve the promise they've made to the society, and how they are making their financial strategies resilient and sustainable. So with that context, if I may start with Professor Bharat from TIS. Professor Bharat, how did TIS confront the unanticipated financial shockwaves? And what kind of adjustment mechanisms were you able to deploy? Over to you.
Thank you for inviting me. So actually, just to reflect on the whole scenario of that unfolded in early last year, I think in over several decades, the academic world has not seen the kind of disruption COVID pandemic has brought about, accentuated by its suddenness and naturally our total unpreparedness in the academic world. We are not prepared for these kind of shocks. And the situation is much the same globally, more so where institutions have depended on international enrollments. But even for institutions like ours, which are dominated by domestic students, the impact has been felt at several levels on our stakeholders of all kinds. The most immediate and serious fallout, as we all know, was in terms of campus closure, emptying out of the campuses and hostels, abrupt suspension of academic activities, and all community-based research and students' field internships came to a halt. So the biggest and immediate financial impact was on investing in strengthening the digital infrastructure, which we had in a limited way. Not that we did not have at all, but we had at a very limited way. And almost overnight, we had to ensure academic continuity and completion also of ongoing admissions for the next batch. We were caught in the middle of it. So we transitioned to online interviews for new admissions, holding digital classes, providing remote access to learning resources, doing online evaluations and viva voce for MA and doctoral students. All this became an urgent necessity. So increasing server capacity, buying hundreds of Zoom licenses, developing a more robust online learning system, also training the faculty and secretarial staff also for use of this learning system, developing e-content and accessing more e-resources was done with great speed to ensure students graduated on time and the incoming batch too did not lose out on admission. And all this was an unanticipated cost to us. Now, the other big impact we felt was on bridging the digital divide that our student body experienced, since a large percentage come from socially, economically marginalized groups and are dependent on the campus cyber library for access to computer terminals. And many of them, of course, come from remote rural areas with poor internet connectivity and frequent power failures. So many of them lacked access to hardware and could not afford to spend data packs. We couriered them laptops to hundreds of students, many in remote locations, and paid for monthly data packs for the entire course duration for several hundred students. The next big and significant impact was on reduced fee collection and non-recovery of past dues. So we needed to facilitate the academic journey of students by providing them for fee concessions, keeping portals open for a longer time, enabling them to pay in installments, and creating a larger corpus for giving them financial aid. So actually access and equity to be managed in a significant way was really a financial decision that we had to take, in both in kind as well as in financial terms. So in a nutshell, say.
Thank you so much for those reflections. It's incredible the kind of support this has provided to students. Now, let me take the same question first to Professor Gyapong and then to Professor Mustapha. And I'm choosing you first because your institutions specialize in disciplines of health and allied sciences, engineering, computer science, respectively, which may have posed some additional challenges because of the resources that they require. So how abrupt was the transition to online classes last year? How did you confront the financial implications of it? Professor Gyapong.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and thanks for having me here. It's been quite a steep learning curve for us. We have had to adapt to many things. We needed to learn very quickly. That is why it became very steep for us. And having said that, we are still in the process of trying to adjust. It hasn't been easy, particularly in areas in Africa, for that matter, where the infrastructure for IT connectivity is not very good. We needed to build a online learning system from scratch. And it was a very difficult experience. But we managed to pull through by reorganizing our finances, by reprioritizing, and having to make some sacrifices. So you only have a limited purse. And therefore, when unanticipated expenditure lines come in, then you need to reprioritize. So basically, that is what we had to do. We needed to cut down on some issues and invest in the IT services. Having said that, we had a peculiar challenge of, having online teaching and demonstrations could be probably much easier with the humanities and the arts compared to the sciences. We are in a University of Health and Allied Sciences, and we train doctors, we train pharmacists, we train nurses who spend close to 70% of their training time on the wards. How do you do that online? It was not very easy. There are some online training modules for practical sessions. But if you want to train a doctor, the best place to be is on the ward and not on the computer. So those challenges were very, very difficult for us. And also, for some reason, we had to cut down on our infrastructure development, other infrastructure development issues. We are a new university. We are only 10 years old this year. So we are still in the process of building. And therefore, our infrastructure budget is much bigger compared to other budget lines. We needed to stop infrastructure and redirect our resources into ensuring that our students are safe and our faculty and other staff are safe. So in a nutshell, we needed to reorganize our financial resources to be able to meet the necessities of the day. And I'll be happy to get into the details as and when we move along. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. I mean, I commend you for the swiftness with which you've made the transition, given the challenges of the discipline that you articulated. Let me take that question to Professor Mustapha. How abrupt was the transition to online classes last year, and how did you confront the financial implications?
Thank you, Prof. Ashish, for the very important question. And I must say from the very outset, thank you so very much to the organizer for inviting us. I think it's important that we have these platforms and sharing platforms from universities from across the globe. We share our experience and the important things that we do. I remember vividly, it was in the context of Malaysia. It was on the 18th of March, 2020, when we first imposed this MCO, movement control order, for the whole of Malaysia. So it was truly abrupt, though the signals were coming from early 2020, January, February, but eventually we had to impose total lockdown for the whole country in March 2020. So, but if I may just share that we universities, we are used to facing challenges, Prof. I think it is only fair that we make that statement. We do face challenges in many ways. I remember very well when we have to face challenges from demand from industry, for us to produce market-ready graduates. Then the issue of affordability, the issue of the need to provide lifelong learning, the issue for us to provide talent for the country and talent for the world. So these are the challenges that we face from early on. But this COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented in a way because it is not a localized issue. It is a global issue. While so many others challenges that we face, they were very much localized in nature. But here we are globalized. It's not only Malaysia, it's in India, in Ghana, and all many parts of the world, and not exempted. So the issue they face is tremendous, it's enormous. That we have to really sit down and do some soul searching in a way and deep dive into what is the best solution for us to embrace and implement. So in our case, from early on, we had this very massive discussion, internal discussion between us. Only that at the beginning, I must say that we were thinking probably COVID-19 will be with us for maybe 3 months, 4 months the most. But now it's almost 1.5 years. I think the whole of 2021 will be a COVID-19 year. I hope that it won't cross over to 2022, hopefully. But then we were lucky, Prof, because in terms of ICT infrastructure, when we launched our strategic plan in 2015, 2016, we anticipated then that we need to have a better, up-to-date, if I may use that term, ICT infrastructure. So we invested in terms of having higher internet speed. We invested in terms of having a studio for us to do recording. And we invested in terms of blended learning. And we have very clear target for blended learning. We have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 of blended learning. So in a way, mentally and to a certain extent, physically, we are prepared to face challenges of this nature. But only that we did not expect that it's going to be so enormous. I mean, for so long that we have to face. So then when 18th of March 2020, when the students had to go to leave the campus and to study from their homes, respective homes, what we did was to ensure that our ICT infrastructure was really working well. I mean, the internet speed is working well, and all the support system were in place. So one important thing, I think, Prof, is that it's all about getting people to be conditioned, to be ready. Even if we have all the ICT infrastructure, physical, in terms of education, physical infrastructure, but having people to be ready and to embrace the challenges is so very important. So hence we embark upon training and some, awareness and so on to get all on board.
Right. Thank you very much. I really like what you said, that it's important for us to do some soul searching to really find the best solutions, given that this year is also pretty much wiped off. Professor Mehta, you've been listening to all these remarks and reflections very carefully. What was your experience managing things in MICA last year, and how did you confront with this financial turmoil?
Right. First of all, it felt very similar to what my 3 predecessors have talked about, right? So we also faced a sharp decline in revenue. Why? Because being a management school, our management development programs were severely curtailed, number one. Consulting vanished, right? From which we get a share of our faculty. And number three, we had to significantly reduce our room and board charges, right? Because except for the last 3 months of the term, when everybody came back on campus, and fortunately we had no cases of COVID on campus, even though everybody came back, partly because we maintained very strong social distancing and masking regulations. But given that the revenue fell, I think the first thing that we did was obviously freeze salary increases. But fortunately, we kept our commitment of not laying off anybody, faculty or staff, or for that matter, cutting their salaries. So we maintained their salaries for a year. This year, we gave everybody a modest increase. So how were we able to square the circle, so to speak? I think the saving grace was that for the past 3 years or so, we had been investing a lot in online learning. So we saw that wave coming, partly because we have been literally at the cutting edge. We were amongst the first schools in the world to introduce, and this was almost 2 decades ago, to talk about digital transformation. So we had a large roster of faculty and courses and received wisdom that we had in this area, which we had been steadily putting online for the past several years. So when COVID came, revenue-wise, we didn't miss a beat, even though our traditional revenues declined very significantly, but almost concomitantly, the online revenues went up. And we had some very good partners that we work with to deliver those programs. So that went very well. That was number one. Number two, and this is where I may pick up on what Professor Nasharuddin talked about, we had to evolve our delivery models, right? So the first thing that we did in April and May of last year, our students come for orientation towards the end of June. So in April and May last year, we completely refurbished our delivery model, right? Our traditional model, and by the way, we have a paper, I'm happy to send it to you, that we've just finished on this. Our traditional model was what I call the 75-60 model, right? A 75-minute in-person class for 60 students. Now that obviously, if you're going online, that is not viable. I mean, students will just go nuts. If you ask them to listen to 75 minutes, lecture after lecture online, they will have digital fatigue. So it took us 2 months, but we nonstop worked April and May of last year to move to what we call a 30-45-36-6 model. So let me explain what that is. So every faculty member is required to introduce the concepts in 30 minutes in a recorded video, which is sent at least 24 hours in advance. This year, of course, much earlier. That is that the students have available to them throughout their stay at MICA, not just for the duration of the course, but as long as they're at MICA, they have access to that video. And then the faculty member comes in and in another 45 minutes, engages in discussion around those concepts, clarifying of doubts, and explaining all these different concepts. And the other thing that we did is that we reduced the class size from 70 to 36, and very often breaking them up into groups of six groups of 6. And if you do the arithmetic, I'm not going to do it. If you do the arithmetic, the total faculty time before students remained the same before and after. Now, the advantage has been, and that was, of course, part of the reason for this model, but the other advantage has been that our entire curriculum now is online, recorded. And so this year, our faculty had a much easier time, because, of course, we do expect that they will revise their videos or add to it or take out snippets. But even revising those videos is so much easier. So the entire curriculum is online, and they just have to press a button and boom, and then they walk into class and take care of questions and discussions and add any new things, etc. So that is what we have done to evolve our delivery and financial models. Happy to share later on what we've done with the students and the course content, but that is probably for later questions. So back to you, Ashish.
Thank you very much, Professor Mehta. It's we look forward to reading this paper and this new 30, 45, 25 pedagogical model. I'm sure it's quite appealing. I want to move to an equally important issue now of admissions and flow of students, which is quite important for all institutions. Now, there is a considerable amount of outreach activities that are carried out to bring the talent, right, to our institutions. Most of these activities, almost all of them, were disrupted last year, and they continue to be disrupted in many ways even now. So let me take that question to Professor Bharat now, because she talked about students in this considerable number of students coming from the marginalized sections of the society and the challenge of access versus equity. So my question is about the challenges that this faced while reaching out to aspiring talented students during the pandemic last year and even this year. And in that effort, I'd really like to know, based on your own observations and experience, the perception of the incoming student about the monetary value of online programs that they are going to be deriving, given that there was financial constraints that households even faced. What has been your experience?
Yeah, thank you, Ashish. That's the really important question. First of all, we were afraid that, this whole COVID pandemic is going to have a very negative impact on students wanting even to, sort of continue with academics, because the way the households have been disrupted, and the economy is not just an individual getting sick, it's the household, it's entire devastation. So what we did was that we, for the first time, I think we advertised in newspapers, and we don't really normally do that, but we felt that we need to increase awareness about courses much larger. So we did that. But what we are seeing is that I think there is a much heightened expectation now from the incoming students for receiving larger fee concessions or fee waivers, easy installments, and substantial reduction in fee charges. Also accessibility to laptops and so on, because we did this last year, and so there is expectation. And we definitely have students from really weaker economic backgrounds and so on. We need to prepare for it. So we are trying to create a larger corpus which will meet the requirements of a large number of students who will need financial aid in a very significant way. But one thing which we are also finding important to really take note of is that the perception that is building up among students and in the general public is that online teaching does not cost as much, and so fee should be reduced drastically. So somewhere this perception goes that you're not spending for students to be there and to teach in the classroom. So what are you spending on? So this perception of online teaching being not as expensive is something which we are dealing with, because contrary to their perception, as you all have also said, the operational costs are not reduced substantially. Building for this infrastructure, digital infrastructure for the internet, band. We also need to consider that we continue to pay. We are a public funded institution. We are not laying off faculty and staff and so on. So we are continuing to pay staff in hostels, in the dining hall, library, and the maintenance and cleaning staff, even temporary staff, even when students are away for the past 16 plus months. And we have to maintain the classrooms and hostels. At the same time, we are not, as others have also said, that we are not earning any revenues from rental of conferences and seminar venues. Consultancies have got down, or the proportion that we earn from, say, a research project has come down. So underutilization of physical infrastructure while paying for the maintenance costs will be unsustainable in the long run, and we have to start preparing for that. And I think if the pandemic forces the continued closure of campuses, of course academic continuity we will ensure, then it is very much possible that students would question the value of higher education in offline mode. And how do we deal with this? Because we need to really keep their interest going, even in coming back to the campuses. And the more students adjust to the virtual classrooms, the more difficult it may become to attract them back to campuses. And I think it is our responsibility that we come to create solutions which are of blended mode, which really give value for their money. That is a challenge we all have to collectively face.
Thanks very much. I might come back to you with a follow-up question on what did you do to kind of correct that perception, that online education, but I'll come back to it. We have a separate segment on it. Let me take that to Professor Gyapong. what was the impact on admissions outreach? That's part A. And part B is, how did you face a similar perception of students feeling that the monetary value we can derive from online programs is just very different, possibly lower?
I think we are in the same world. Our students have been agitating for reduction in fees and charges because they think that online teaching is basically costs nothing. And that is one of the things that we are trying to deal with now. Some of them are demanding refunds. And but I must say that the situation has not impacted on our admissions, probably because of the kind of programs we run. Everybody in Ghana wants to be a doctor or a pharmacist or a health professional. So we are usually oversubscribed. So we have not had a challenge with subscription. The challenge, however, has been ability of students to pay their fees. As you would know, household incomes have gone down, and therefore it's been quite tough for some students to pay their fees. So our recovery rate currently stands around 70%. So our students basically are owing us. In the past, we would have prevented them from writing exams because you know what the regulations are. If you do not register, if you do not pay your fees, you are not able to register, you're not able to attend lectures, and you're not able to write exams. But now we've come up with a flexible mechanism for them to be able to pay in installments. So that is one of the things that we're doing to try and address this specific issue. But on the whole, our admission uptake is still very, very high, and we are still oversubscribed. But I know that some of my colleagues in other universities in Ghana who are running some of the not very competitive programs on our part are having challenges with enrollment, especially private universities. And our private universities have had a very big toll on them as far as this pandemic is concerned. They've had to cut down on faculty. They've had to reduce salaries, and it's been really tough, very, very, very tough for some of them. And some of them are on the verge of basically shutting down because of the challenges of the financing of the university in this particular environment. Some of them did not have the infrastructure to be able to go digital. So obviously, they are not in competition. And I think this is something that we should not lose sight of. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Well, at least you're oversubscribed, which is very heartening to know. It speaks volumes of the programs you offer. So thanks for those remarks. Let me move to Professor Nasharuddin. Did the Malaysian MCOs, as you said, the lockdown orders and other restrictions disrupt the outreach activities, disrupt the enrollments? And what's the perception of students about online teaching?
Thank you, Prof. Ashish. It's reality, yes. If I may share with you, in Malaysia, we have public universities and also private universities. I think it's the same as in other countries, private universities and private colleges as well. In terms of enrollment in Malaysia in higher education, there are about 1.3 million students in higher education, and almost 50% in private higher education institutions, and another 50% public. So year on year, Prof. Ashish, I may share with you, say from 2019 to 2020, there was a drop of about 20 to 30% of students enrollment in private higher education institutions. So this is a stark reality that we face, students, reduction in student coming on board across the board, about 20 to 30%. So we have to manage this. If I may share, because we talk about enrollment, first is that we have to ensure students who are already in our system, so that we do not want them to drop out and, you know, face all the challenges, and probably they may extend, but not to the extent that they drop out. So what we do, I think it's important to share, is that for us to really manage them whilst they are in home, we need to provide a strong support system for them to enable to continue their studies, though maybe a few of them have to extend because of issues of internet connectivity and so on. So managing students already in the system is so very important. But then the issue is also how to get students coming from post O-level, coming to universities, or international students coming to Malaysia. This is a challenge. It is a real problem in Malaysia. Parents and students take a wait and see attitude. They will say, okay, probably we will not register yet in June or July and September, October. Let us see if the situation were to improve, then probably they'll come on board. So we have to really manage this issue and explain to them that running a program face-to-face, running a program online, virtual and flexible, does not mean that quality is compromised. I think it's so very important that we bring the message across that quality is safeguarded, because we have ministry, we have quality assurance agency looking at the accreditation process and so on. So that's not really something that parents can be worried about. But it's again, we have to put the message across to the society. And also another challenge that we face is that because of pandemic, the affordability is a real concern. So in Malaysia, the household income reduced. So this is also an issue that probably we can deep dive a bit later. How do we actually address this issue of affordability so that students can come on board, whether during this pandemic or post-pandemic, and so there's no worry about the quality and so on. So it's a matter of a strategic move initiative that we have to embark upon.
Right. Thank you very much. You've really raised some very important points. Professor Mehta, you've again heard all the panelists. It seems that students see a kind of lower return on the investment when it comes to online teaching. There's also seemed to be some kind of a perception problem. How they are perceiving online teaching and what kind of resources goes into this model is not understood very well. Now, MICA excels in strategic marketing and communication. Do you think this is a problem of institutions not being able to convey to learners and other stakeholders of how resource intensive this technological change is? That's my first question. And a second question is, are the disciplines around marketing and communication, social sciences, just generally less impacted when we talk about enrollments?
I think we were not impacted at all in terms of the number of applications. In fact, there was a slight increase this year, partly because we are so digital friendly, in terms of our core curriculum, etc. That may have been one reason. The problem that we faced is that we have a really unique interview process. Of course, we have a regular interview, which is conducted in different parts of the country. But then we also have a group project that we give them as part of the interview process in small groups. And our faculty observe how they actually solve problems in a group, because that skill is extremely important. Now, obviously, with the pandemic raging this year, when we had these processes going on in February and March, which was at the height of the pandemic, it took extra effort to make sure that everybody was safe and that we concluded those processes safely. I'm happy to report, touch wood, everything went well. I think hats off to our faculty. They just improvised. I think Indians are very good at improvising when things are uncertain. So that brings me to my second point, which is the major point that I want to make in this segment. We realized, not just last year, but even prior to that the world is changing. It's a VUCA word, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we started preparing to create immersions for our students so that they can make sense of that complexity. So as we speak, we have 4 immersions. rural, urban, international, and entrepreneurial, of which 2 are compulsory. The rural and the entrepreneurial immersion. The entrepreneurial immersion, we launched last year in the pandemic. We had been preparing for a year prior to that. What that requires is that every student at MICA, while they are there with us for 2 years, let us say, they have to launch a business. They have to start and launch a business as part of their curriculum. And this curriculum lasts for the entire 2 years and the 6 terms that they're with us. Now, it took a year to launch this. 3 of my colleagues and I are spearheading this. I'm personally leading the charge because I realized long time ago that the model that Stanford pioneered, and that is something that we have to make ubiquitous. That is, students should be thinking not just about getting jobs when they graduate, they should be thinking about giving jobs when they graduate. In fact, I'd like to, and I'm proposing this for the first time in this conference, I'd like to propose the concept, we talk about carbon neutral, right? We'd like our institutions, our management schools and our professional schools to embrace the concept of what I call job neutrality. That is, our students should be giving as many jobs, let us say over the next 10 years, as they would be absorbing as part of the recruitment process. So that is the big goal that we have set for ourselves. And I'm happy to report that 48 businesses were launched last year as part of this program, many of which are already revenue positive. One of the 48 teams chose not to go for summer placement and chose to focus entirely on their startup. And I'm pretty sure of these 48, some more will be mature in time for graduation next year in April next year. So I'm hoping that at least 3 or 4 teams will not go for placement. And that will be a big step forward. And I'd like to increase that number in the years to come. So in a nutshell, if I were to sum up, the world has changed. It was changing even before that, but with COVID, it has decisively ruptured with the past. And our students are now going into a world where they will have a 40-year career. Remember, pensions no longer exist. They basically have their own retirement savings that they take with them wherever they are. And they will have a work life of, my guess is, with the life expectancy going to be 90 years for women at least, a 45-year work life, in which my sense is they will change a job at least 12 times. Right? This is the world we are preparing them for, and especially our women students. And by the way, MICA is gender neutral, right? From our inception more than 20 years ago, we've had 50% of our students being women without any quota, any kind of, because of our entrance exam, right? It emphasizes creativity and logical thinking at the same time. So women and men have a level playing field. But think about it from the point of view of women. If you're going to plan for a 45-year, if you're a woman, a young woman, planning for a 45-year career, in which you'll have to throw in child rearing, caring for older people, your parents, your in-laws, it's a unique challenge. And really, if the woman has to be in control, the best way to do it is for her to start a business and to do it ASAP. Because then you're the boss, you tell people what to do, not the other way around, right? And you can monitor the cadence that you want, and you can regulate the cadence that you want. I want to go into high cadence now that I'm single, but I want to go into a lower tempo the moment I get into child rearing. You should be able to do that, and a startup will help you do that. And of course, we've put together a document which we are now going to share worldwide about how we went about it. It took a lot of planning and a lot of resources and a lot of investment to get this right. We are still making mistakes, but this is where I think, when I was a professor at Purdue, I taught there for 16 years before returning to India. We learned from the Stanford model, and they encouraged us to launch a business. So in 1999, I launched a business, and for 8 years, until I returned to India in 2007, I ran that company while teaching full-time. And that business, and I remained on the board till 2014, and when that company was sold. And then since then, I have incubated another startup of which I'm a co-founder. That is also now going forward rapidly. So I'm bringing all these experiences into the classroom so that our students are prepared for the VUCA world. And I'd invite our faculty to do the same thing.
Thank you very much. These are some very, very interesting insights and ideas that you've shared. Now, I would like to exercise the privileges I have as the moderator. I'll skip my own question I had in mind, and I'll move to the audience round. We've already received a number of questions. So let me start with the first one. It's from Lavanya Malani. And she's asking, since a lot of financial investments have gone into shifting to this virtual mode, are the universities planning to shifting to hybrid or online mode permanently? Is that an option? I would like to take that question to Professor Nasharuddin first. Your quick reflections on that, Professor.
Thank you. I think it's inevitable that we have to embark upon this online digital and flexible learning. As I see it, face-to-face is very crowded and it is a red ocean. Now we have to move fast towards digital and flexible learning, but we must focus into our niche area rather than get the market crowded in digital platforms. So we need to identify our strength area, our niche area. In our case, our area is in energy. So those are the things that we are doing. And we do put our target to get more students off campus coming on board, and we strengthen our digital learning center. We strengthen our teaching learning through having more of our lecturers being adopted to this digital flexible learning. So I think the way forward it is, yes, digital flexible learning will be the main issue, but also in terms of financial implication, is much cheaper, I would think. The initial investment is, yes, we need to invest upfront, but in the long term, it is much is cheaper. We do not have to provide the facilities as required to face-to-face. We do not have to have so many resources to support.
Right.
Yes, I think that's the way forward.
But Professor, do you think financially online only is a viable option?
Oh, yeah, I would think it's going to be hybrid.
Okay.
It's going to be hybrid. Yeah, it's going to be a combination of both.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks very much. Any speaker, any other panelist wants to weigh in on this question?
Yes, I could. Okay.
Professor Bharat. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, my own thinking is that, education is an experience. It's not just about a teacher, a lecture. It's just about, experiencing the whole thing with fellow learners in the system, being in the system and interacting with not just your teachers, but interacting with the entire institutional, setup, your libraries, your, cafes, your dining hall. So this whole experience, I think, is unique to student life. So I would, but yet at the same time, we have experienced that, yes, online teaching is possible. Online, works. And for certain kind of courses, it will work very well. For mature learners, it is going to work very well. So even if for your UG and PG classes, you have students coming back to the campuses, there are many courses which can be done online. And I would also think that, investing more in vocational education, in our case, social entrepreneurship courses where, as Professor Mehta said, we encourage students to create more jobs and create more people who become self-reliant. I think for many of such things, a hybrid model, a blended model will work. And I think we all need to create those in a very creative way and learn from each other. So I would go for a hybrid, possibly.
Thank you.
But I would also say, Ashish, it's a little too early for us to sort of give a judgment on, this or that. I think if it continues, we will have to really think creatively. Otherwise, for social science kind of courses where community is our lab, people often think social science universities are not as expensive, but we need to be back in field. We need to be doing things with communities. And in that sense, we need the kind of support, and blended learning may help us, but we need to still see how it.
Right. Thank you for that. Professor Gyapong.
Yes, I was just going to say almost same as the previous speaker said. And to add that for us, this also gives us the opportunity for those who are already in work to be able to upgrade themselves. There are many people who are wanting to take time off and come to the university to upgrade their skills. And the blended learning mode gives them this opportunity. I mean, hitherto, if you had a diploma in nursing and you wanted to upgrade yourself to a higher degree, you would need to take at least 2 years off to be able to come to the university and upgrade your skills. But now they are able to combine, and I think the blended learning approach is the key way to go. But for us, as I mentioned earlier, the critical thing is how to ensure a real practical experience. And I've seen all the learning modules available, and it's still, there is something missing. I mean, you can't train a doctor or a nurse just online. You need to be on the wards. And for us, that is very critical. Thank you.
Thanks. I asked that question because the first session of today, of this summit, was touched on digital divide and online learning, where we had 2 speakers from online learning platforms, Upgrad and Coursera, who had very different views on the same question: is fully online an option? Anyway, let me move on to another audience question from the audience that I've received from Sandal Agarwal. And the question is, how are universities, it's for all the speakers, so anyone can pick it up. How are universities planning to support research, particularly that have social impact, which contributes to the social and economic recovery during a pandemic, but they require financial resources? How are universities approaching this dilemma? Who would like to take that up?
So I think if I can just add a point on this, we are making sure that we do not cut our research budget. Now, the good news is that we had a very large travel budget of people going to conferences globally and immersions and this and that. Fortunately, a lot of that has come down. So even with slightly diminished revenues, we are able to maintain our focus on research, making sure that the data sets, the industry connect, the connect in general that our faculty have is strengthened as opposed to weakened. So that has been our approach.
Right, thank you. Professor Bharat, if you could please respond to that. And I want to add one thought to it, given that TIS is, spends a lot of effort and there's a lot of research output that comes out of randomized trials and field survey work where the interaction is directly with the stakeholders, with the users. What is your reaction to this question?
Yes, I think this is a collateral damage we have suffered because, research has not the funding so much at this point in time, but research itself in the field has, had to take a back seat. But we are not slowing down in that sense. We are looking towards more of, industry connect in this. The unfortunate part is that there is a lot of interest in the industry in supporting STEM subjects, social science and technology, and all those things. But social science is really not given that much importance. But the pandemic has shown that if you neglect mental health, if you neglect the social connectivity, if you neglect what is happening in communities, I think we are paying a huge price. We have field action projects, 18 of them, 19 of them currently on, and almost all these field action projects, just continued working. And for the entire time they were in the communities because they're all working with professionally qualified staff. And fortunately they had funders because they needed to support communities. They needed to remove this whole stress and they needed to reach out for mental health and so on. So that's the connect we make with communities. But I hope, and we are looking forward to having industry and philanthropic organizations supporting the kind of work we do. And the pandemic, I think, will make them see the importance of such social science research. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, I think this is a very relevant point that our colleague made. And for us, the other dimension is that as a University of Health and Allied Sciences, we were called upon by government to support the response to the COVID pandemic. we are in the eastern corridor of the country with a population of close to 5 million people. And all of a sudden, our university became responsible for testing and treating and doing almost everything for this whole corridor. And I mean, to cut a long story short, our resources as a university basically went into all this. If you know the way governments operate here, they ask you to do things and they bring very little resources to support you. So almost all our savings for research and all that went into such activities. And we've had a challenge with the whole issue of uptake of vaccines. And our social scientists needed to come on board to engage with the community to be able to try and bridge this very, very critical gap. So research that impacts upon the community and service delivery from the universities makes us very relevant in such times. Otherwise, the community does not recognize what it is that we're doing. And as far as they were concerned, we were just offering a service that was very relevant.
Right, thank you very much. I have a very interesting question. Oh, sorry. Do you want to add something, please?
Yeah, just briefly, I think I want to echo what has been mentioned earlier on. I think as a university, teaching, learning excellence, research excellence, and financial sustainability are three important aspects that we have to look, and we cannot in any way disregard, including research. Second is that briefly, in terms for universities, what we in Malaysia, we call it as RS1, revenue stream 1 from tuition fees, revenue stream RS2 from endowment, RS3, revenue stream 3 from research, consultancy, commercialization. Surprisingly, Prof. Ashish, surprisingly, in this COVID-19 pandemic scenario, there are so many industries, companies who are willing to give research grant for us to conduct research on the impact of COVID on society, on the well-being of society and so on. I think that realization is there, only that we have to show that we can conduct all those for the benefit of society.
Thank you very much. I know we're running out of time, but I have to take this one question that has come in from the audience. It's an open question from Shikha Patel. Universities may consider developing a financial model that permits students to continue to pay fees even after they graduate without taking the bank route, instead of burdening them in years when they are not even earning. Any quick reactions to that proposal?
Actually,
Please.
we have removed those kind of entry barriers. If students are not able to pay, we have not prevented them from entering their classes, and we have also said that after they have passed out, they should be able to pay in installments. The only thing is that I think we have to make sure that this repayment is based on their earning capacity. If they are not started earning, we can't be insisting, but it should be run on the long run. And here the role of the government, I think, is very important, because the government at least must make it possible for all the scholarships, fellowships that come in the name of government to be released in time, and for all those students who are meant to receive them. In our case, a lot of students who are from reserved categories must get those fellowships and scholarships, and that is the role of the government. And on our part, I think we should be able to allow students to pay back when their earning capacity increases. I completely agree, and it should be possible for us to develop those kind of models, for which I think the role of philanthropic organizations and foundations is very critical, because they should start contributing and supporting institutions with endowments, which is the way the US universities sustain themselves. I think that is something which we need in India. It should grow as a big movement.
Right. Thank you. Yes, please. We're running out of time, so if you can have quick responses to that.
Quick one. I think what people say is when there is crisis, there's opportunity. Now because of pandemic, there are quite many workers have been laid off. They lose jobs. I think looking at that, there's opportunities for us to get them to come on board. to get their degrees, masters or PhD, whilst they are out there in the doldrums. So there has to be a very strong message put across that come to universities. Universities as a whole now do remove the stringent requirements for students to pay first before they can take exam. We understand the situation that we are a bit more flexible. And even more important, if I may share, quite many of us universities in Malaysia do provide scholarships for students, especially from the poor students from poor background. What's important is that we want to develop talent and get them to come on board and get their degrees and so on. We have check-ins with government. I think government also have realized that it's now to invest. It's now to invest by providing a lot more scholarships for students. And this is the good sign, as I was saying, opportunities whenever there is crisis.
Well, Professor Gyapong, 15 seconds.
Yes, truth be told, this will be very difficult to do in Ghana. We don't have a system for tracking our people. Government gives loans, and the loans are, almost zero rated interest. So the university will not take it upon itself to be tracking people to come back and pay their fees after they have left.
Excellent. So on that note, we've run out of time completely. Thank you so much. What I can say is to be financially stable, to stay afloat, what we need, other than all these creative financial models, is strong, resilient leadership that can manage and handle crises in time, which is what all of you institutional leaders have demonstrated. Thank you so much for your time, each one of you. It's been a pleasure to host this session. And now the session is closed. Thank you.